The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches tangled in a macabre dance, as Dr. Emma Taylor's SUV wound its way up the mountain road. The GPS had led her deep into the woods, the signal growing weaker with each mile. She had almost given up hope of finding the place when a rusted sign materialized out of the gloom. Raven's Peak, elevation 4,850 feet. The words seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. A chill coursed through her veins as she navigated the final stretch, the trees giving way to a clearing. In the center, a sprawling Victorian mansion rose like a specter, its turrets and gargoyles reaching towards the moon. Emma's heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was it, the infamous Raven's Peak Sanitarium, where the boundaries between reality and madness had once been pushed to the limit. She brought the SUV to a stop, the silence oppressive. The trees seemed to lean in, as if listening to her every thought. Emma took a deep breath, the crisp mountain air filling her lungs. She had come too far to turn back now. With a sense of determination, she grabbed her bag and stepped out into the darkness. The only sound the soft crunch of gravel beneath her feet. The massive wooden doors, adorned with rusty hinges and a heavy iron knocker in the shape of a raven's head, creaked and groaned as Emma pushed them open. A musty scent wafted out, carrying whispers of the past. She stepped across the threshold, her eyes adjusting to the dim light within. A chandelier, its crystals dulled by years of grime, hung from the high ceiling, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Emma's gaze wandered up the grand staircase, its carpeted steps worn and faded. The air was heavy with the weight of forgotten memories, the silence punctuated only by the soft ticking of a clock hidden somewhere in the depths of the mansion. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she ventured further, her footsteps echoing off the walls. In the foyer, a dusty chandelier pendant in the shape of a raven seemed to watch her every move, its glassy eyes glinting with a malevolent intensity. Emma's skin crawled, but her curiosity propelled her forward. A door to the left, hidden behind a tattered velvet curtain, creaked open by itself, beckoning her towards the darkness within. The wind outside stilled, as if holding its breath in anticipation. Emma's heart raced, her senses on high alert, as she stepped across the threshold, into the unknown. The room was a shrine to the past, the walls lined with yellowed photographs, their subjects' faces faded like ghosts. Emma's gaze wandered over the images, the people's eyes seeming to follow her as she moved. In the center of the room, a large, oak desk dominated the space, its surface scarred and scratched. A single, leather-bound book lay open, the pages dog-eared and worn. As she approached the desk, Emma noticed a small, silver locket, partially hidden by the book. The locket's lid was open, revealing two miniature portraits. The faces were familiar, yet strange, like echoes from a forgotten dream. One of the portraits depicted a woman with piercing green eyes, her features pale and gaunt. The other showed a man with a strong, angular face, his eyes haunted by some deep sorrow. Emma's fingers reached out, as if drawn by an unseen force. She lifted the locket, the cool metal heavy in her hand. The portraits seemed to shift, the faces blurring, then sharpening into focus. Suddenly, the air in the room condensed, the shadows coalescing into a presence behind her. She spun around, but there was no one there. The wind outside picked up, the trees creaking and swaying in the gusts. Emma's heart raced, the portraits in the locket seeming to whisper secrets in her ear. She felt the weight of the past bearing down upon her, the silence in the room oppressive, like a held breath. The locket slipped from her fingers, the portraits facing upwards, as if gazing up at her. Emma's eyes transfixed on the faces, the green-eyed woman's stare piercing through her. A low hum, like the distant thrumming of a harp string, began to vibrate through the air. The sound swelled, the notes weaving into a haunting melody that echoed through Emma's mind. The room began to spin, the shadows dancing around her. The photographs on the walls seemed to flutter, the faces blurring, then reforming into new, distorted images. Emma's balance faltered, the hum growing louder, more insistent. She stumbled backwards, her hand grasping for the desk to steady herself. As she regained her footing, Emma's gaze locked onto the open book, the words blurring into a madman's scrawl. The pages began to turn, the words shifting, rearranging themselves into a message that seemed to pulse with a malevolent life of its own. They wait for you, Emma. In the silence, in the dark. They wait for you. A cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing the faint, flickering light. The hum ceased, the silence that followed, oppressive and heavy. Emma's eyes strained to see, but the darkness was absolute. She was alone, lost in the void, the only sound her own ragged breathing. Suddenly, a faint, eerie glow emanated from the walls, casting an otherworldly light on the room. The photographs on the walls seemed to shimmer, the faces reforming into new, more sinister versions of themselves. Emma's eyes darted between the images, her mind reeling as she realized that the faces were changing, their expressions contorting into macabre grins. The air was heavy with an unnatural electric charge. Emma's skin crawled as she sensed an unseen presence closing in around her. The hum, now a gentle thrumming, seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the mansion itself. The words on the page, once a madman's scrawl, now blazed with an ominous clarity. The silence will consume you, Emma. The darkness will be your shroud. A faint, whispery voice, like the rustling of dry leaves, seemed to caress her ear. You should not have come here, Emma. You will never leave. Emma's heart raced, her breath coming in short gasps. She backed away from the desk, her mind screaming warnings, as the faces on the walls began to fade, replaced by an endless, dark expanse. The glow intensified, casting an unholy light on the room, as if the very essence of madness was unfolding before her. The darkness deepened, a palpable entity that threatened to engulf her. Emma's back pressed against the cold, damp wall, her eyes fixed on the desk, where the book lay open, its words pulsing like a malevolent heartbeat. The whispery voice, now a susurrus of evil, seemed to seep from the very walls, echoing off the stone. Suddenly, the room was bathed in an intense, white light, as if the darkness itself had been illuminated. Emma's eyes, adapted to the dimness, recoiled from the brilliance. When she opened them again, a figure stood before her, its presence commanding, its face a death's mask of beauty and horror. The woman's eyes, green as emeralds, bored into Emma's soul, their gaze a cold, calculated weight. The face, a masterwork of Gothic elegance, seemed crafted from the very fabric of the mansion. Emma's mind reeled, her breath caught in her throat, as the woman's lips, pale and inviting, curved into a macabre smile. "Welcome, Emma," the woman's voice whispered, her words like autumn leaves rustling in the wind. "I have waited so very long." The silence that followed was a living, breathing thing, a creature that wrapped itself around Emma's throat, squeezing the air from her lungs. The woman's eyes, unblinking and cold, held Emma's gaze, as if daring her to try and escape,